Whether thou art a ghost that hath come from the earth, or a phantom of night that hath no home, or one that lieth dead in the desert, or a ghost unburied, or a demon, or a ghoul, whatever thou be until thou art removed, thou shalt find here no water to drink. Thou shalt not stretch forth thy hand to our own. Into our house enter thou not. Through our fence break through thou not. We are protected, though we may be frightened. Our life you may not steal, though we may be scared to death.
Welcome to Scared to Death, Creeps, Peepers, Roberts, and Annabelles. I'm Dan.
Hello, Dan. I'm Lynze.
Hello, Lindsay Lou.
Hello, Daniel Dew.
Lindsay has a quick little charity announcement, and then we are off into a very big show. Lots of stories today.
Lindsay is trying really hard to not just bust out singing Father John Misty songs.
Okay.
Just so everyone's aware where my head's at. This month, we are sending $11,800 over to the AP. Founded in 1846, the AP continues to provide words, fact-based journalism, and remains the most trusted, most accurate, most unbiased news source in all formats of news. More than half the entire world's population consumes news provided by AP journalists every day, and we're excited to support journalists in over 100 countries as they continue to report on the biggest stories that affect every single one of us. To learn more about what the AP is up to, you can visit apnews.com, and we are throwing $1,300 into the scholarship fund, which will go into the 2026 scholarships.
Yeah, awesome.
Boom, 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 boom.
And now, what true horror have you curated for us from the fan stories sent into mystory at scaredtodeathpodcast.com? I hear you have a lot of them.
I don't have one, not two, not three, not four, but five stories for you guys this week. My first two stories actually revolve around family members sticking around after they've left their earthly bodies. My third story is a very short, very funny little leprechaun story.
Okay.
And after all, it's March, so it felt incredibly fitting.
Yeah.
My fourth tale brings us a poltergeist tale in 4 small moments. And my fifth and final tale involves a shadow figure who may leave behind some lasting effects on those who see it.
Interesting.
Yes, a wide variety.
Yeah, I like it.
Good. I'm glad. Me too.
And you were saying that fans should not worry as much about length with stories. Like they can do these short ones too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when I was putting this together, a lot of times when I get these, they're like, "Hey, I know this is really short." Conversely, I get emails that are like, "Hey, I know this is so long." Obviously, length being too long is a little bit harder to bring into this format. But a small story of just a few paragraphs is completely fine to send in. And, we just want to encourage everyone to remember that all kinds of stories are welcome here anytime, regardless of the topic or the length.
Awesome. My first of 2 stories comes from Finland. It's been a long time since we've been there.
Okay, let's go.
Over 3 years, not since episode 117, The Melting Clown. We talked about this haunting relating to this triple homicide in Lake Bodom in 1960, where 4 teens were attacked at a campsite outside of Helsinki. One barely survived. The killer remains a mystery, and the story had to do with the occult, a woman trying to possibly offer someone as a sacrifice.
Aye.
This time, we're going to visit the super creepy Vejo Rönkkönen statue garden. It is a collection of nearly 500 concrete human figures sculpted by the garden's namesake, a famously reclusive artist who added human teeth to many of his disturbing sculptures.
Oh, boy.
Yes, I have pictures.
Oh, boy. I can't wait to talk about a friend of mine who collects human teeth.
Okay. And then someone claims that in recent years, they were disturbed by more than just these statues when they visited. And then we'll take a very quick trip, small story, to the city of Jeda, Saudi Arabia, to discuss the supposedly haunted, very mysterious Jeda house. When you're ready, all spooped up, I'll begin.
I think you mean all socked up.
Oh, spoopy socks. I meant spooped.
Oh, okay. Well, I just didn't know. I got these fun,
nice,
hot pink and green Friday the 13th socks.
That's a really cool design.
I know, isn't that good? These socks are really cool. They're actually, I have this box. It was like a advent calendar of horror story socks. and so I've just been parsing them out. I didn't want to just only do those. But from this fan, Jaden, I think Jaden gave me these socks a year ago. So I've been just trying to spread them out. And I think these are my favorite ones from that box.
Those are very cool. Yep.
Like Watermelon Friday the 13th.
Mm-hmm. Okay, here we go. Vejo Rönkkönen. Oh man, Finnish words. Wow. But Vejo Rönkkönen
You're doing great.
was quite the recluse. He lived in the same small house that sat on the same small farm, located in the same small 4,000-ish person municipality of Perikala that sits in Finland along its border with Russia, from his birth in 1944 all the way to his death in 2010. According to the accounts of those who knew him, or knew of him, more likely, he simply wasn't very interested in the rest of the world. Like, at all. He wasn't even interested in what was happening nearby in the town he spent his entire life in. Rather than focus on this world, he instead built a world of his own, and he was perfectly content living in it, a world constructed largely out of concrete and human teeth. Over the course of 52 years, Vejo Rönkkönen sculpted around 500 statues resembling human beings to populate his odd property with. Peering out from behind dense forest trees, lingering in hordes around the house, hiding in bushes, dancing in the meadow, and crawling over the landscape, are hundreds and hundreds of uncanny concrete figures. Most of them are painted, a few are falling apart, and nearly all of them are smiling. Sinister, perverted smiles, some of which bear real human teeth. What's known as the Vejo Rönkkönen Statue Garden is a place many who visit consider the creepiest place they have ever witnessed firsthand. 200 of Vejo's unusual statues are self-portraits. Each of them are naked and positioned in a different yoga pose. Some are women, some are men, so he's doing some interpretation with his self-portraits. All of them generally considered to be horrifying. With their gaunt, sunken faces, beady black eyes, skeletal bodies, and twisted limbs, the collection of concrete yogis were created by Vejo to be reminders of how he looked, or how he felt in different moments throughout his life. Despite their grinning mouths, the facial expressions of the majority of Vejo's figures are profoundly hostile, malevolent even. Their jaws jut out unnaturally, their gaping mouths open far too wide, their nostrils flare like animals about to strike. And their teeth, again, they're real human teeth, yellowed and crooked, protruding out from cement gums like gravestones, give the distorted caricatures a sense of sentience, which is the last thing you want them to have. According to the artist, he acquired the human teeth from various orthodontists and dentists around Finland, but some people speculate that their true origins are perhaps much more grim. Hidden within the hollow insides of some of the statues, the artist also put wireless speakers that play tape recordings of someone mumbling incomprehensibly. So despite the fact that their mouths are frozen in place, when walking past one of these figures, you can't help but feel like they're trying to talk to you, perhaps even trying to have you save them from something, or to warn you. Though he dedicated his life to molding his statues, Vejo Rönkkönen never intended for them to become a tourist attraction. After all, he considered them to be his friends. Still, when people from all around Finland, and then from far beyond, began to flock to his farm in Perikala, Vejo did not turn them away. Instead, he hid inside his house and allowed them to peruse his work while he watched from a window. He never charged an entrance fee. He also never spoke to anyone. All he did was leave out a single notebook on a table near the entrance, asking visitors to write their names inside. Over time, Vejo's garden became one of the biggest landmarks in all of Finland, and Vejo himself became known as one of the country's greatest folk artists. He frequently got requests from museums and galleries to put his work on display, and to every single request, he answered with the same thing: I need to check with the statues first. And the statues literally always said no. In 2007, the Finnish government awarded him the country's highest award for contributions to art and culture. In addition to the title, each year the winner also receives a sum of prize money, and when Vejo won, he was given $30,000. Though he did accept the prize money, Vejo did not attend the award ceremony held in his honor because he did not want to leave his house. Or rather, he did not want to leave his friends. Or perhaps he felt they did not want him to leave. They would be angry. His brother accepted the prestigious award on his behalf. Then 3 years later, at the age of 66, Vejo unexpectedly died. The day he passed had started off as a normal day, normal for him at least. He woke up, he did some yoga, he greeted each and every one of his roughly 500 statues, took a swim in a nearby pool, came home for an afternoon nap, and then never woke up. Whenever someone had asked about what he wanted to happen to his statues in the future once he was no longer around to take care of them, the very reclusive artist said he wanted them to be buried for thousands of years, like the famous Chinese terracotta army. He never wanted his garden turned into a business that someone could profit off of. He felt it was right that his statues should fall into ruin, and that the concrete and the paint and the teeth should return to the earth just like his own corpse would. However, that's not what happened. After Vejo left his estate to his siblings, they tried to gift it to the regional government to become a public, site, landmark, property. However, the Perikala authorities denied their offer, stating that the cost of maintenance would be too expensive. So, unable to care for the property themselves, Vejo's siblings ended up selling his land and all that sits on it to a Finnish multimillionaire and entrepreneur named Reino Uusitalo. After renovating the dead artist's childhood home to turn it into a gift shop, refurbishing the landscape to make it more accessible to the paying public, restoring the paint on some of the statues, and clearing off the moss that had grown over others, on July 23, 2011, Uusitalo hosted the grand reopening of Vejo Rönkönen's sculpture garden. The park's entrance fee was set at €10 for adults and just €2 for children under 5. And since the artist's death, many reports have come out about people experiencing strange, unsettling things while roaming around in his creepy garden. Supernatural things that they can't explain, unfathomable fear that they don't understand. These reports have largely been ignored as the tourist attraction itself is meant to be strange and unsettling, kind of like a funhouse at a circus. But maybe, just maybe, it's not only the avant-garde art that makes Vejo's garden so terrifying. Maybe the place is actually haunted, perhaps by the artist himself, or perhaps by something less human than even the hundreds of sculptures that inhabit it. Today, let's hear what one man claimed happened to him while visiting the garden and decide for ourselves what we think is the truth about this mysterious place. This story was originally posted on an online paranormal forum. We've reformatted the story just a bit to make it easier to listen to, but we have not changed any of the paranormal claims. Time now for the tale of his teeth. When I was 19, I did a semester abroad in Finland at the University of Helsinki. I was, and still am, painfully shy. So meeting new people and going to new places has always been hard for me. Because of that, my time in Finland was just okay. Don't get me wrong. The country and the culture and the people and the food are all amazing. And the program I was part of was intellectually challenging, and I learned a great deal. It was the social side of things that weren't great. And that was mostly because, well, I'm not very social. I spent most of my time there with 2 fellow students, one of which I still keep in touch with today. Their names were Tyler and Hugo. Both of them are American and were in the bioengineering program just like me. Near the end of the semester, Hugo, Tyler, and I decided to go on a long weekend trip to Joensuu, a city on the eastern side of the country that is known as the forest capital of Europe. A few days before our trip, Tyler invited a Finnish girl named Karina to join us. I actually had met Karina a few times on campus and enjoyed her company, but still the new addition to our group made me anxious. Our plan was to take the main railway from Helsinki to Joensuu and to make a pit stop halfway through the route to spend the afternoon in Perikala. If you've never heard of it, which I had not before going there, Perikala is a fairly small Finnish town that's just 6 miles from the Russian border. We were stopping there because Tyler and Hugo had heard about a sculpture garden they wanted to check out. It struck me as odd because neither Tyler nor Hugo seemed like people who would remotely enjoy a sculpture garden, but they were insistent. And so was Karina, so I agreed. After a 3.5-hour ride, we finally arrived at Perikala station. From there, we immediately got on the bus to go to the sculpture garden so we could make it back in time for our train to Joensuu. On the bus, I remember asking them what kind of sculptures were at the park. They all just sort of giggled, mostly Tyler and Karina. "You will love it, Henry," said Karina. "Yes, I think you're really going to like the artist," added Tyler while he smirked. "You and him have a lot in common." I don't think I even responded. I'm used to people teasing me for being an introvert. It doesn't bother me. I just put on my headphones, stared out the window at the thick forest trees, defrosting in the spring warmth. Eventually, the bus driver pulled over on the side of the highway. I think it was Highway 6 to be specific, and the 4 of us got off, and then he sped away. About 10 or 15 feet from the highway, there was a small path that cut through the edge of the forest. There were no signs that said where we were, but since my travel companions all started confidently making their way to the path, I figured we must have reached our destination. As soon as I crossed the threshold of the property, I felt almost nauseous. I figured that it was just anxiety about being the fourth wheel, so I brushed it off and went about my way. Hugo, Tyler, and Karina were all walking quickly down the curved, narrow path towards what looked like a red cottage with a chimney. They seemed anxious to get inside. I wasn't. I was distracted, a bit disgusted even, because lining the path, there were 20, maybe 30 statues of people, creepy people, all walking in the same direction as me. There were so many of them, men, women, children, babies. All of them looked like kind of the same and kind of like a human being, but not really. Whoever the sculptor was, I thought, they were terrible at sculpting. The uncanny valley vibes really gave me the creeps. Suddenly I realized I could no longer see my friends. I was alone with all the stone people and, well, I guess you could say I started to panic. I ran, but I couldn't get away from the statues. As soon as I turned the corner, there were more. There were hundreds of them, covering every inch of the land. So many of them were naked, bent over in weird positions, twisting their limbs together in ways that bothered me more and more. Then I came around another corner and nearly screamed. I almost ran into Tyler, and he was with Karina. "So what do you think?" asked Tyler, grinning stupidly. I remember thinking that he looked too much like the smiling statue directly behind him. "It's, weird," I said uneasily, still staring at the statue. Tyler turned around to see what I was looking at. "You see this shit?" he said, bending down so he was at eye level with the mouth. "That's real human teeth, Henry. Real human teeth." I remember thinking that for a second the statue looked like it was staring down at him instead of at me, contemplating whether or not it should bite. I remember thinking strangely that it should. Wow," I said absent-mindedly, trying to act like I was totally fine with that. Tyler then went into this whole spiel about how the artist was a hermit who stole most of the teeth from corpses at the morgue and took others from bodies he actually dug up. So when he had said earlier that the artist and I had a lot in common, he was saying that we were both creepy loners. Cool. I bet you can guess which guy I've stayed in touch with. Eventually, Tyler and Karina took off to go explore the park, and I went in the other direction to find Hugo. At one point, I passed by what I can only describe as a man tied to a tree face forward, with his bare rear end exposed, and another man next to him with a whip and a shapeless grin. Near another tree, there was a kingly figure, covered in moss, banging a drum while some women danced in front of him. I also saw a band of children all marching behind a drummer boy whose mouth was filled with what looked like adult teeth. There were other children too. They were everywhere, doing cartwheels and somersaults and acrobatics all around the front lawn. I hated it. Some of the stone children were naked, and it made me really uncomfortable. There were some other tourists in the park that day, most of them old white people that seemed to be really enjoying the place. There were a few families there as well, but the parents seemed to be enjoying it a little less. I remember coming across this one little girl, an actual child, not a statue of one, huddled against the base of a tree with her knees pulled tight to her chest. Her eyes were squeezed shut, and she was covering her ears with her hands. The woman that I assumed to be her mom by her side trying to console her in a language that sounded like Swedish. I remember thinking that I understood why she closed her eyes. I was a 20-year-old adult, and even I was tempted to close mine. But I wondered why she was covering her ears. But then as I continued down the path, I heard it, a muffled, hollow voice, muttering something under its breath. It was like someone was speaking to me through a set of string and empty cans, like my siblings and I tried once when we were little kids. But I couldn't figure out where it was coming from. Well, I could actually, but I couldn't comprehend it. The voice was coming from a statue, one of the ones with teeth. It was naked with a very grotesque bulge between its legs, and its limbs were bent in a way that made bile rise up again in my throat. Its eyes were carved low on its face, and they were painted white except for 2 black dots in the middle, which were looking in different directions. I remember it had a nose and nostrils and eyebrows, but it was also sinister that it barely looked human. It hardly had a chin, so its mouth looked like it was in its neck, and it had so many teeth. I didn't stick around long enough to count how many, but I could have sworn it had quite a few more than the normal 32. Its voice sounded like it was being smothered or suffocated with a pillow, but I knew that couldn't be the case because there I was, staring right at its open mouth. Looking at it, despite how inhuman it looked, it still seemed alive. So much so that for a second or two, I almost said, "Hello?" Then I realized how ridiculous I was being. Clearly there was a speaker inside the statue's body, somewhere, playing a recording. Still, I sympathized with the little girl covering her ears. The sound was so haunting, so real, and completely disturbing. I then headed back down the path in search of Hugo, trying not to let my face reveal how uncomfortable and unsettled I felt as I observed still more statues. There were a lot more naked figures, smiling and contorted like the one that spoke. I learned later that each of them were in yoga poses, but to me it just looked like their bodies were hanging on invisible hooks like some pigs I once saw at a butcher's market, if that makes sense. At some point I noticed that amongst the yoga statues, there must have been hundreds of them in this one section of the garden alone, there was a tourist. Normally I avoid meeting the gaze of a stranger, but as soon as we locked eyes, I couldn't look away. I felt transfixed. He was very old and very thin. He almost looked too frail to be standing. But there he was, staring directly at me from in between all the concrete bodies. He was standing so still and he looked so gray, you could almost mistake him for being one of them. He had the same gaunt face, the same angular arms and legs, and somehow he also had the same look in his eyes. But unlike the statues, he wasn't smiling. His lips were parted slightly, I think, but his jaw was slack. I don't know how long we'd been staring at each other when suddenly the old man began to move. Not his body, but his mouth. Slowly, he opened it wider and wider and wider still, his eyes fixed on me the entire time. Even though I was at least 10 feet away, I felt like I could see clear into the back of his throat. I could see that he had no teeth. Silently horrified, I put my head down and briskly walked, maybe even ran away. It was at this point that I decided I was done with the statues. I wanted to leave. And I didn't want to see any more statues while I was still trapped in the park. So I kept my head down as I walked, focusing solely on putting one foot in front of the other. I maintained a steady rhythm until I abruptly came across something blocking my path. It was a statue of a man, wearing a large black cloak and a bowler's hat. His hands were pulling open either side of his cloak, like someone committing indecent exposure. But he had no body to expose. It was just empty space. The sight was as horrifying to me as if I had come across a real body, a human body, that had been excavated of its insides. He, like so many of the others, was grinning at me, baring rows of human teeth. There was the figure of a woman behind him, with her legs crossed in a very, I feel a bit embarrassed saying this, but it's true, a very sexual way. And her mouth was agape, like she had been scandalized, or maybe like she was moaning. Carefully, I made my way around them, with the intention of continuing down the path and avoiding looking at any more of them. But again, something was in my way. It was the old man, frozen in the middle of the walkway, about 10 feet away from me again. His toothless, gummy mouth was still suspended in the same position as when I'd last seen him, yawning open, like he was screaming, but no sound came out of his mouth. All I heard was that incoherent mumbling, and it was getting louder, closer, and he was too. He was coming for me. I shut my eyes and covered my ears, just like the girl. I could hear his footsteps against the gravel getting closer and closer until he was right in front of me. I felt his hand grip my shoulder. I yelped. My eyes shot open. Standing before me was Hugo, Tyler, Karina. But none of them were touching me. I rubbed my shoulder, where I just felt the old man grab me. My skin was crawling. They nervously asked if I was okay, and I didn't answer. I was really freaking out. I pushed past them to get a better view of the path, searching frantically for the old man, but he was gone. Or maybe he was still there? There were so many statues, hundreds of them, everywhere I looked. He could be hidden anywhere amongst them. He could be one of them. As I scanned the park, I heard Hugo say something behind my back. "What was that?" I asked, whipping around. He looked a little stunned. Tyler, that prick, excuse my language, was stifling a laugh. Karina looked concerned. Hugo spoke nervously. It's time to go. If we don't catch the next bus, we're going to miss the train." I shook my head. That's not possible. We've only been here for like 15 minutes. My words were directed at them, but I felt like I was talking to the statues. "No, dude, we've been here for 2.5 hours. Tyler interjected before sharing a look with Hugo and Karina that indicated he clearly thought I was crazy. "We've been looking for you for the past 30 minutes. Come on, dude. Time to get a move on." I was so confused. All I could do was follow them down the path back to the highway. Hugo asked me again if I was okay. I nodded. I was afraid to talk. It was the strangest sensation. I was afraid that if I spoke, all that would come out of my mouth would be that horrible mumbling sound. A few hours later, we were getting settled into the hostel in Joensuu. It was a co-ed lodging space with rows of beds all lined up in a narrow hallway-like room. Luckily, we were the only people staying at the hostel that night. Karina picked the bed closest to the window. Tyler tried to claim the bed next to hers, but she told him to go farther down towards the other side of the room. I cannot overemphasize how happy watching that made me feel. I think the eventual layout was me in the bed closest to the door, then Hugo one bed away from mine, then Tyler 1 or 2 beds away from his. I'm not sure. It's not important. What is important was what happened that night when we fell asleep. Even though my mind was still foggy and muddled from the anxiety of the day, I was so exhausted that as soon as my head hit the pillow, I immediately passed out. About halfway through the night, around 1 or 2 a.m., my eyes shot open. The room looked so eerie, illuminated only by the sliver of yellow light streaming under the door to the hallway and the pale blue glow from the moon outside. I looked over to check on the others. Hugo was dead asleep, but Tyler's bed was empty. I figured he had just gone over to Karina's bed, so I didn't worry. I slumped back onto my pillow and shut my eyes. I tried to think of other things, like my impending final exams, the logistics of moving back to the U.S. in a few weeks, if I needed to buy a new suitcase, or if my old one would work just fine, but it was no use. All I could see in my mind's eye were those statues, their smiles, their mouths, their teeth. I felt a bit nauseous again. Just when I was about to get up to dig for an Advil PM in my backpack, I heard footsteps approaching the room. Terror ripped through me. I told myself it was probably just Tyler, coming back from the communal bathroom. Or maybe someone had checked into the hostel really late. But deep down, I knew the truth. I wanted to pull the blankets over my face and hide under the covers, but I was paralyzed. My lungs felt heavy. I stared at the ceiling, waiting for him to finally reach me. I heard the door creak as it swung open. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the light from the hallway flood into the room and his dark silhouette standing frozen in the doorframe. I felt his eyes when they fell upon me. He took slow, deliberate steps towards my bed. The closer he got, the louder it became, that muffled, horrible voice. It was emanating out of his open mouth, just like it had from those statues. He stood next to my bed, loomed over me, staring down at me. His mouth was petrified in that same sickening position, jaw dangling wide and lips furled, exposing his gums and tongue. I heard that incomprehensible voice, muffled yet still booming out of his throat. It was so loud I didn't understand how the others hadn't been woken up yet. Suddenly he lifted his right arm and slowly placed his cold, clammy hand over my mouth. I tried to scream, to call for help, but my voice was muffled. I can't put into words just how all-consuming the terror was that I felt in that moment. I feel it right now while writing this post. And then I realized that he and I were making the same sound, the same voice. It was my deadened, muffled cries that were coming out of his mouth. For a fleeting moment, the old man removed his sweaty palm from my mouth, and I tried to call for help, but as soon as I opened my mouth to scream, he shoved his fist inside. I gagged, and then I threw up, or tried to. Some of it spurted out, and I could feel it drip down my chin. He didn't take his hand out. I was choking. I couldn't breathe. And then I felt him dig his nails around the base of some of my teeth, trying to pry free from the roots to rip them out of my mouth. And then my vision went black right after seeing his face inches from mine. His mouth was still wide open in that same position, but I swear on my life, now he was smiling. And then I woke up. I woke up to Hugo shaking my shoulder, shouting in my face. I remember feeling so groggy and so confused. And my mouth was sore. Frantically, I ran my fingers over each of my teeth. They were all there, but one of my molars in the back was very loose. Hugo told me they'd all woken up because it sounded like I was trying to scream for help but couldn't. It sounded like I was suffocating. I told him that I had been suffocated, that there was an old man in the room. I'd seen him earlier that day at the park. He was trying to steal my teeth. I knew how insane I sounded, but it was the truth. Hugo just stared at me blankly. Karina looked terrified. Tyler laughed and shook his head. I swear I saw him, I tried to explain, but they weren't going to believe me. Then I think I started crying. It was so embarrassing, but I didn't care. I was telling the truth, or at least I thought I was. Now I'm not so sure. Maybe it was just a dream, but it's weird, right? That I would have that dream after I went to that park? I have never had a dream like that before or since. And if it was a dream, I don't think it was a normal dream. I mean, why would that tooth be loose? It was loose for days after that, before it tightened back up. It's been fine ever since, so it's not like I had a cavity or something happened to coincide with that trip. No, it was like somebody really tried to pull my tooth out. I think I saw him. The man who made all those sculptures. And I think he saw me. And somehow I think some of him stayed with me that night after we left his creepy park.
What?
That's an intense dream.
Can a tooth loosen and tighten back up?
I think so. I mean, I'm not a dentist, but I think, yeah, like if you because if you got, if you got like punched and it like loosened one of your teeth.
Yeah.
You don't always have to go to the dentist for that. It's like, It's like, yeah, like it damages the tissue in your gum around your tooth.
Uh-huh.
But like any other tissue on your body, it'll heal in time.
Okay,
And
I
so
didn't think
it would,
about it
would
that way.
then heal and firm back up.
I'm going to ask the
I
dentist.
think.
the
I
next-
think. I'm not positive, but I think that's how it works.
My mom worked in dental care for many moons. I will be texting her.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because like the story is creepy and strange and weird, but then that little detail, I'm like, I don't know about that.
Took you out of it a little bit?
Well, like made me question
Totally.
whether or not he just had a bad dream.
Yeah.
And like, okay, I don't know if you've ever had this
I'm
feeling.
looking up right now while you're asking about that.
Okay. I don't know like if you've ever had this feeling or anybody listening where generally when you're younger and you are still losing teeth, you might like run your tongue over your tooth and you're like, ooh, my tooth feels loose. But it is not loose at all. It's a permanent tooth. It's like you can convince yourself that it feels kind of loose even though it's not.
Yeah.
All right, what'd you find?
It says, yes. Can your gums tighten back up after your tooth gets knocked loose? Yes, in some cases, your gums and the tooth can tighten back up after a tooth is knocked loose, especially if the underlying cause is mild or can be addressed with proper dental care. That was just a quick little AI thing.
Yeah, and that might just be like a matter of like, gargling with warm salt water and keeping the area where the contusion took place clean and healthy. And if you are, lucky enough to have access to clean water and good food and all of those things, like, yeah, probably that makes sense to me.
Yeah, it says on some dentist site, they can tighten back up, but it depends on why your teeth are loose. For example, if you have very advanced osteoporosis or sustain a severe injury to your mouth, there's very little chance that your teeth will tighten back up on their own. But even that one, it leaves the door open. It's cracked. It says very little. It doesn't say there's no chance. So,
okay, great. Well, thanks for clarifying. I'm still going to text my mom.
yeah.
This whole story is so strange.
The park is so strange.
I am excited to look at photos. Do you want my comments and notes now or after the photos?
You know what? How about you see these statues?
Okay, let's do it.
And maybe they'll inform your comments here.
Okay.
So, no photos accompanied, accompany the modern encounter claim, of course. But, I have pictures of the creepy statues. This first one is called Flogging by the person who posted it, Vejo Rönkkönen on Flickr.
It's interesting to me that, this does inform what I'm about to say, to quote you. I was thinking in my mind, I wasn't thinking, okay, this statue is fascinating. He's wearing like a suit coat. He's got riding boots. He looks like a jockey with his
got a little whip
crop, with his riding crop.
Yep.
That's actually what he is. I bet he's supposed to be.
I don't know. Or just like an old timey, like gentleman or something. And then there's another man, like tied. Yeah, he's facing the tree. His hands are bound to the tree. His pants have been pulled down in the back. And looks like he's about to get his bottom spanked.
And he's smiling. He looks very happy.
He's excited about this.
What I was about to say was like, oh, that's crazy for like a recluse. I'm like, duh, Lynze, everybody has porn. Like,
and everybody has
clearly like,
even if he didn't have porn, he would like have his own fantasies.
Of course. But this feels like something he took from Pornhub.
Maybe. Or what I'm saying.
Yeah,
exactly. The equivalent. Absolutely. Yeah, totally. And then this next one.
I love how specific you were about to be like, well, in Finland.
This next one's titled Naked Yogis, also posted by Vejo Rönkkönen.
Okay, so this doesn't like give me the like ick factor. And I'm not kink shaming anybody. I'm just saying like that other one was strange.
Oops, yeah.
But this one doesn't bother me nearly as much. It reminds me of these wooden, they're like these wooden statues that a lot of gift stores will sell, where it's usually like a mom holding two babies and they are generally like wooden with like white painted skirts or whatever. Just these like carved things. So I'm like, okay, this feels like an art installation.
Yeah.
This doesn't feel as concerning as the other one, except for the person who is not in a yoga pose, in a like yellow loincloth, kind of looking like, oh my.
I know. This next one.
This guy should have got out more. He would have had a lot of fun having sex.
This next one's called Greek Choir. And it's like some lady who looks scared in the bushes. And then some guy behind her with like a black mask. It's maybe chasing her. And then three Greek-looking guys in togas behind all the two of them. I don't know what they're doing.
Well, the person in the black. It's like a oh my God, what is the word I want? Middle Eastern
Hijab or something
hijab.
like
Yeah, thank you.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Or
interesting.
maybe that is their hair. I don't. That is a weird. But the person who looks scared almost looks like, oh my, surprised. And now this person is going to, again, it just looks like a sexual fantasy.
Uh-huh.
This person is going to be, quote unquote, abducted and taken to those 3 men.
Something, yeah.
Wow, this guy really.
This one is it's titled Naked Guy Covered in Moss.
Very accurate.
Posted again by Mikko Munin. Okay. Oh yeah, I was gonna say I didn't think he was a guy, but now I can see he's got his wiener on the sculpture.
It's called a penis.
Mm-hmm. His penis, also called a wiener. And then this one comes from Atlas Obscura.
Okay, that one is creepy.
It's some kind of Grim Reaper guy. It's like a creepy kind of skull, but also like a baby face, but
like a pinhead.
Yeah, a tiny little head compared to the body. That's odd.
Oh God, what is that? It's like from Beetlejuice, like the big guys with the tiny heads.
They got their head shrunk?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Uh-huh.
But this is the first statue in the park that actually feels creepy and not sexual.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Yep. I mean, who knows what he's chasing?
Fair.
Maybe it's sexual if we could see the statue in front of him.
Fair enough.
And then one more, just this is
his dream woman.
Yeah, just another statue of some woman with teeth via gosaima.com, some Finnish website.
So like the thing about the teeth on this one that freaks me out is it's like a really good set of teeth.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That's like a nice set of dentures.
And then the eyes, it is very disturbing where you have like these human teeth in this mouth. So it's like, realism.
Yeah. Very truly obvious that they're real teeth.
Uh-huh. And then like, a realistically shaped nose. And then the eyes are just blank.
Yeah. They're like black mesh.
Yeah. It's a very disturbing effect. It looks like a monster. It looks like something that came out of a nightmare.
It's like claymation monster.
Uh-huh.
It's really, I don't know. It's kind of funny to me. It doesn't freak me out. I think it's really funny.
It's just how fascinating that's what he did with his life.
Yeah, what an interesting guy.
For decades, he just worked on these statues, didn't want to go anywhere, didn't want to leave. Probably quite a bit.
It seems like the vast majority of this is very. I didn't get the feeling that when you were telling the story, it didn't have a sexual overtone to me.
Yeah.
Like, yes, naked, but like, okay, so much of sculpture art is naked. So I didn't think anything of that.
Maybe he's sexually attracted to the statues he makes.
Okay.
Maybe that's his fetish. Or was his fetish.
To each his own.
Yeah.
Today I had lunch with a friend who told me that a kid at their school has been telling one of her kids that he should go home and stick his wiener in a jar of peanut butter. Every day for about 6 weeks, he's been telling.
Oh my God.
And I said to her, I go, what do you do about that? She's like, well, after it kept happening, I finally went to the principal and was like, listen.
Right.
Like,
it's been a month.
Right. It's not just like a one-off and like my kid is coming home crying. Like, why does he want me to put my penis in peanut butter?
Also, your friend should probably take their peanut butter and put it up on the very top shelf. Just in case.
Just in case.
That would be a horrible day.
Oh, God. Why are there little hairs in the peanut butter?
Oh, my God. What a nightmare.
What a nightmare. Okay. Just a few thoughts I had on that. Okay. So I do have a friend who collects oddities just in general. And her and her husband would go to flea markets and just buy like the strangest things that they could. Jars upon jars of human teeth.
Oh my God.
But like also the same people who would collect a random puffer fish, like a dead stuffed puffer fish. Not particularly odd people if you met them, but if you go to their house, it's just like this one, it's just oddities.
Yeah.
They're both creative, so I don't know if there's just I don't know.
Huh.
That was cracking me up. And I don't know anything about that.
And where were these friends?
In LA.
Oh, funny.
Yeah. I'll tell you who it is later.
Yeah.
And I don't know anything about this Japanese terracotta army.
Oh, Chinese.
Terracotta. I'm sorry.
It's I would have to look it up. I'm sure anybody listening can to get the information. Cool. But if you I've seen it before. Chinese terracotta army. It is. Oh my gosh, I would need a pronunciation guide. Emperor
Palpatine.
Qin Shui Shuang. Perhaps it's like QINSHIHUANG. But it is his army. They are from 248 BC, It's a collection of terracotta sculptures depicting the armies of this emperor, who was the first emperor of China. And it is crazy, this architectural site, when they were dug up, there are, oh my gosh, estimates from 2007 were that there were 3 pits containing the terracotta army holding more than 8,000 soldiers.
Whoa!
130 chariots with 520 horses, 150 cavalry horses. And these are all statues in this huge, big rectangle.
Interesting.
That they unearthed.
That is so cool.
Uh-huh.
I have never had a desire to be an archaeologist, but when I hear about things, digs that archaeologists go on, and then, of course, it's always like in the hopes that you're going to find something.
Yeah.
It is so fascinating. I just can't imagine the excitement of like, oh, we found something. Can you imagine being part of the team of people that found that?
It's amazing.
That's incredible. Well, I'm going to do some digging into that. And then just real quick before we move on to our next story, just because we were talking about dentists.
Yeah.
Shout out to Dr. Brady, who helped found the Halo Dental Network. We donated to them ages ago. But it's a very, very, very cool thing. You guys can go to the Halo Dental Network. I don't know if it's .org or .com, but he is a dentist in the Pacific Northwest, and he started this thing for people who can't afford reconstructive dentistry. And he has worked to build a network of dentists and a variety of mouth professionals across the country to help people who, I don't know, maybe they were in a really bad car wreck and they lost a bunch of teeth but didn't have insurance, or maybe they're a recovered addict who lost a bunch of teeth. It's a very cool thing, and I just think he's a lovely human.
Yeah. I agree. Not met him personally. We've messaged back and forth a few times, and he's pretty funny on. I don't have his handle memorized, but I know
think it's
on
just Dr. Brady.
Maybe Dr. Brady, but he's very funny.
He's very funny. Yeah, cool guy. So, anyways, that's that.
Are you ready to leave Finland for Saudi Arabia now?
Okay.
Jeddah, Saudi Arabia is a popular resort city and a major travel hub in the Middle East. It's the gateway for millions of faithful Muslims making their pilgrimages to Mecca, which is located just 40 miles away. And it's a city that has existed since long before the formation of Islam. Historians believe Jeddah was established in the 6th century BCE, that it was originally inhabited by fishermen who sailed and did their fishing out on the Red Sea. The city's nickname is actually the Bride of the Red Sea. Today, Jeddah has a population of more than 3.7 million people. It's a modern and bustling commercial center, the second busiest seaport in the entire Middle East. And of course, like every other major city in the world, it has various locations believed to be haunted. There is one spot in Jeddah considered to be so haunted that still today, some taxi drivers allegedly refuse to take passengers there or even go near it. It's said to invoke a feeling of such dread when you approach it, that while a number of curious and generally young paranormal explorers are drawn to it every year, few are willing to cross the threshold and actually enter. Time now for the tale of the Jeda House. This place is simply called Jeda House, and it has a reputation for being dangerous due to the many supposedly violent spirits said to be lingering inside its walls. The Jeda House was once a luxury family home that sits about 100 yards from the seafront. Along the North Cornish, a popular seafront promenade of luxury shops, dining, and resorts, full of beautiful fountains and green spaces. According to local lore, the house was built in the 1970s, but was then abandoned in the mid-80s for reasons no one can seem to agree on. Other than that something terrifying caused its wealthy occupants to flee, abandoning their beautiful home and leaving most of their personal items behind. A handful of trespassing explorers claimed to have discovered things inside like a child's French textbook from the mid-1980s, a National Geographic magazine from 1984, and a children's slide made in the 80s tied to the stairs, which would seem to prove that the rumors are true regarding when it was supposedly abandoned. The house that now sits empty was once said to be full of a family's love, joy, and care for the home. There are still remnants that hint at what it once looked like fragments of Italian tile, cast iron railings, a marbled front patio. Elaborate rusting ironwork decorates many of the windows. There's also evidence that the house once was nearly lost to a fire. The ceilings and walls are said to be blackened with soot, and melted wiring protrudes from some of the old light fixtures. No one seems to remember if the fire was caused by vandals, or if the fire was what caused the original occupants to flee. And if that is the case, then what caused the fire? Was it an accident? Or was it caused by forces outside the family's control? Perhaps supernatural in nature. While the streets around the house are full of noise, the area in its immediate vicinity is strangely silent, occasionally interrupted by a crow's call. It's been this way for decades, and no one is quite sure why. All they seem to know with certainty is that the house is dangerous, even deadly at times. According to local legend, a total of 16 people who have entered the decaying house since the 80s have never been seen again. They were witnessed walking in, and then no one ever saw them again. Since no body was ever found, they haven't been classified as being deceased. They've simply vanished. Just over 20 years ago, in 2004, a pair of researchers from the news outlet Arab News decided to spend the night in the house with cameras and recording devices to see if they could uncover the truth about what was inside. They seemed genuinely scared. They entered the house full of trepidation, not sure if they would come out unharmed, but determined to document whatever they could find. The two journalists, Roger Harrison and Issam Al-Ghalib, wrote of their night in the home. At night, the house changes character completely. Sooty walls and ceilings add to the depth of the gloom in the body of the house. At times, the darkness is total. Distorted yellow rectangles of light penetrate the front windows and form an intricate latticework on the rear walls. They said that the most difficult part of the endeavor was finding the courage to enter the infamous house. Once they were inside and ready to explore, they headed down a set of servant stairs into the basement, where they were surrounded by complete darkness, and where the pair said they didn't feel as if they were completely alone. The team claimed they heard, quote, stealthy skitterings, perhaps the sounds of rodents, perhaps something else they hoped to never actually see. Once back upstairs, they said they heard a deep, heavy cracking sound, which may have been the house moving on its foundations, or once again, may have been something else entirely. Up until this point, everything they heard or felt had a very plausible, rational, earthly explanation. But then they heard whispering. The team claimed they continued to hear small whispers throughout the night. At first, they assumed it was a breeze passing through the halls, but as the night went on, they started to have their doubts. It sounded like human voices, and they wondered, was something attempting to communicate with them? They also noticed a hum that reverberated throughout the house. Where did it come from? The house hadn't been hooked up to electricity for years. There were no working electronic devices inside other than whatever they brought with them. They also both said that something about the house just felt unusual, even sentient. As they got more and more used to the house, it was as if the house became accustomed to them as well. When they first walked in, they felt a nervous, threatening energy. They later wondered if the house was wary of them. But then the longer they stayed, it was as if the house seemed to begin to accept them, somehow understanding they meant no harm. By the time the early morning hours began to roll around, they felt a certain sense of calmness, and the whispering had stopped. Ultimately, the research duo admittedly saw no ghosts, no moving shadows, and no objects floating unnaturally through the air. They heard no doors opening or shutting on their own. They never felt anything touch them. But they acknowledged absence of proof is not proof of absence. And despite their lack of finding any concrete evidence of the supernatural, other than the strange whispering perhaps, which could be the wind, they nonetheless walked away as believers. The Jeda house will continue to be a place of mystery, intrigue, and possibly the paranormal. It seems as if it may hold secrets it's not eager to share with its visitors anytime soon.
Huh.
I like that as a representation of, like, sometimes I just did a little interview before this recording with the guys at Astonishing Legends, which I love. And we talked about just this, like, when you get like a very, very powerful, weird vibe from someone out of nowhere.
Absolutely.
Or out of a place. You know, it can be like a home you walk into and you're like, I don't like it here. Something here does not feel right. You're not seeing a shadow walk out of the walls or anything. You know, you're not hearing like something powerfully obvious is like a creepy voice, saying distinct words that you can't write off as the wind. It's nothing big. It's just the way it makes you feel. You're like, this is, I shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely know that feeling. I mean, I imagine at this point in the show and in our lives, everyone who's listening can say like, yep, I've had that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And it could
What
be
is that?
brief. It could be like, I was, in a bar and I just was like, I don't know. I mean, we could sort of have a funny story about a local bar that we walked into. We were like, oh, this is not good energy.
Right. And that one wasn't paranormal. It was just like,
just energy, just in general. Like
these people don't want us here.
Exactly. And when I think of a intuitive feeling, when I walk into a space, perhaps where there are no living, breathing humans that I can see, and I get that same feeling of like, I am not wanted here.
Mm-hmm.
I like what they said, absence of proof is not
proof of absence.
Is not proof of absence.
Mm-hmm.
It's, a confusing little saying, but when you think about it, it's like, no, that's so true. Just because I can't show you doesn't mean it's not there.
Totally.
And I think that's, just the paranormal in general.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. I bet there's a lot of great stories out of the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, mostly we've just covered like jinns and.
Which makes sense. I mean, jinn is essentially like, equivalent to demon.
Mhm.
Basically, I mean, people can like, haggle over like the exact nuances.
Of course.
But to me, from the outside of both, it's just like, yep, that's just that, these cultures equivalent of demon. There's a, fair amount of those stories. We've only told a few,
Yeah.
but I'm sure so many are out there.
Yeah.
No pictures for this story. The best articles I could find about the Jeda house from this ArabNews.com, they didn't include pictures, and then the pictures other random sites included weren't the same.
Oh.
And I just never felt confident enough, like, oh, this is it? Because there's like multiple articles, each claiming that this different place that clearly wasn't the same place
Sure.
is the Jeda house. So I'm just like, you know what? I'm not going to throw something out there that I have no idea if it's the place or not.
Better safe than sorry. I popped my computer open as you started telling that story because I was like, there's some, I think I've even talked about it here, but I was like, there's some celebrity that moved to the Middle East and it like kind of boggles my mind. I was like, oh yeah.
Lindsay Lohan.
Yes.
Yeah.
She moved to Dubai.
Yeah, you told me that.
I don't, it just is like, but it's, I was just like, wait, where did she go? Where in the Middle East was she? For some reason, I wanted her to be in Saudi Arabia and I was going to be like, let's get Lindsay Lohan to, listen, she loves Freaky Friday. I think,
my God.
I think she just made another one of them. I think I saw an article that there's like a Freakier Friday maybe coming out, something like that. And I was like, come on, just go check it out, Lynze. For the name, do it for the namesake. So that was fun.
Good.
Thanks for sharing that. And then are you ready to hear some super fun tales on my end?
I am. And I also want to tell the Scared to Death listeners, I will be in Nashville.
Yes,
at the Nashville Comedy Festival here. I don't have the numbers and dates in front of me. I think you do, though.
Yeah. So, many of you ask like, oh, where can we see Dan? What's the deal? And as you know, he took the last year and a half now off of touring, and we don't know when he'll get back to it. For now, we are locked in at home with Monroe, enjoying her final year here before she heads off to the next phase of her life. But if you would like to see Dan do his thing and possibly catch me hiding in a corner, giggling hysterically, you can find him this April 11th and 12th in Nashville at the Nashville Comedy Festival. It's a Friday, one show Friday, two shows Saturday. If that's all too much to remember, go to badmagicproductions.com and hit the Dan Cummins comedy tab at the top, and off you go.
All righty. Thank you.
You are so welcome. Do you have a Layla?
I got a yellow Layla, and I'm ready for these stories.
All right. Let's dive in. Hey, guys. Love the show. I'm definitely a creeper. I'm in tune with the supernatural and have been my whole life. I lived in a funeral home for most of my teenage years, but that's a different story. I would like to share with you a story about my grandparents, whom I've been very close to my entire life. In 1964, way before my time, they bought a house in northern Michigan. After they retired in the early 80s, they moved there full time. Every summer, I spent weeks on end with them, helping my grandpa build things and working on various projects. I truly loved it there. I never wanted to go home. Flash forward to about 6 years ago, my grandpa fell and fractured his neck, leading to him going into hospice. My family gathered and said our goodbyes. I told him how much I loved him and thanked him for all he had taught me. And then he passed away that night. A week later, I was assigned to a project at work in a town about 20 minutes from my grandparents' house. My grandma suggested I stay with her during the week as it was a 2-hour drive from where I currently lived. My entire family thought it was a great idea as our grandma was in her 80s, alone, living on a dead-end road in the woods. It was great staying there, actually. Grandma and I had many wonderful talks, reminiscing, talking about work, and so on. A couple weeks into my stay, my grandma went to visit my aunt for a few weeks, leaving me alone in the house. It was a bit lonely, but peaceful at the same time. I would come home from work, make dinner, and relax on the back porch overlooking the woods. A few days into my time alone, I woke up to the sound of someone walking down the hallway into the kitchen, followed by the distinct sound of the refrigerator door opening and shutting. I thought to myself, it's just Grandma. And then, as I was rolling over and trying to fall back asleep, I remembered she wasn't there. I didn't feel scared or uneasy, and I fell back asleep quite simply. The next day at work, my thoughts drifted off to the night before. I remembered that my grandpa had always had a glass of water in the fridge and would get up in the middle of the night to get a drink. The sounds of someone walking down the hall and to the kitchen to open the fridge continued for the next week without fail. I went back to my home over the weekend, and then that following Monday, I returned and my grandma was back as well. She asked if I had been lonely by myself, and I said no, not really, that I thought Grandpa had been there to keep me company. She smiled and said, "Well, he is still here," as she pointed to an end table in the living room with a small wooden box on it. She said, "He's right there," with a little smile on her face. I knew he'd been cremated, but I hadn't realized his ashes were literally right there. This whole routine continued happening for the next few months, right up until the whole family could gather and spread his ashes in the woods at his favorite spot. After we released him, the nightly visits stopped. Kevin.
That's a great story, Kevin.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah, that's so. I like that little button at the end where they're hearing these footsteps in the kitchen for months, and then as soon as they spread the ashes that were kept in the house, he was good to go.
Yeah, he
Gone.
was let loose.
Yeah, stories like that. The totality of stories like that is so fascinating.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I enjoy that very much. Okay, number 205.
I know, I like these little ones.
I know sometimes it's really great. You speed through them, but again, like you're saying, when you take all 5 of them at the end and you're like, okay, even if 4 people were full of shit,
Right.
but one person was telling the truth, that's still enough.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Dear Dan and Lynze, my
Hello.
my paranormal experience happened 2 years ago. It started with one of my grandson's toys making sounds on its own when no one was in the room late at night when I was the only one up. No one was ever in the room when it happened. By the time I would get to the toy, it would no longer be making noise. At first, I thought maybe I was going like a little crazy, but then my husband heard it too, so I knew it really was happening and it was mystifying. The experience went on for months, but culminated in the wee hours of the morning of my birthday. My husband is a early to bed kind of guy, but I am a night owl. He'd already been in bed for a couple hours, sound asleep. I'd been listening to a podcast on my phone, probably Time's Up, and I opted to go to sleep, closed out the app, plugged the phone into the charger in our bedroom. I needed to brush my teeth, so down the hall to the bathroom I went. As I began brushing, I heard music playing from the bedroom, which was really weird since A, I hadn't been listening to any music, and B, I thought I had shut down all of my apps. I ran back to the bedroom to turn off the music before it could wake my husband. There was just one problem. No apps were open on my phone. I couldn't make the music stop. There was nothing to stop. There was nothing to turn off because no apps were open. I was at a complete loss. At first, I was freaked out, but then I paused a moment and I listened. Joe Stafford was singing "I'll Be Seeing You," a song from the 40s. It wasn't a song I had ever listened to on my phone. However, I remember hearing it at my dad's house. My dad always had music playing, and Joe Stafford was one of his favorites. My dad had passed away in 2010. I had a psychic reading and was told that my dad was pushing everyone else out of the way in order to try and talk to me. The longer I listened to this music mysteriously coming from my phone, the more I thought it was my dad's way of coming back to say hello to me on my birthday. I thanked my dad for the birthday wish and told him that I missed him and that I loved him. And then I shut the phone down completely to end the music. And it never happened again, along with the toy never making another sound on its own either. Love you both. Love the podcasts. Your loyal space lizard, Colleen.
Aw. Yeah, thanks, Colleen. Yeah, that's really cool. Again, just like how it's centered around that date of her birthday.
Mm-hmm.
And then just so random, like this. I mean, I don't know that artist. It seems like a fairly obscure song, at least today, obscure.
I think if we heard it, we would know it. Or maybe I've just decided that I know it because in my teenage years, I was really into Mary Higgins Clark's books. And she had a book called "I'll Be Seeing You." And I think that it was like woven into the theme of that book.
Yeah. But it clearly wasn't a song that Colleen had been listening to in recent years when that happened. So yeah, and the fact that was like one of her dad's favorite songs. And then again, her birthday, and then the toys acting up, and then that stuff not happening again afterwards.
I know. I see it as like the toy for, like she said, that was going on for a while. So seems like for days, weeks, months, how long that happened, her dad was like, hello, I am trying to talk to you.
Yeah.
And then it's cool that it culminated on her birthday.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do it again.
Okay.
This is a story as told to me by my grandmother, Vicky. She always had the best stories, most of them supernatural occurrences she witnessed as a child in the 1930s. I loved to listen to her recall them again and again, and this was one of my favorites. As the story goes, one stormy night during the muggy New Mexico summer, Vicky, along with her 4 siblings, were all asleep in the main family room. During times like these, the children would open the windows and doors and sleep on the floor, as this was much cooler on the wooden floor. She slept closest to the open front door, which had a wooden screen door with no latch. After a loud thunder crash woke her, Vicky noticed a very, very small hand sliding through the opening for the screen door. Half asleep, she rubbed her eyes and peered as yet more of what she described as a, quote, little man, and would later call a leprechaun, came inside. She described the squeak of the wood and a tap, tap, tap of his little shoes scurrying just a few feet away from where her head laid on the pillow. Yes, she did say he had on an entire outfit, including a little hat and tiny heeled shoes. She then tells of how, as if the tiny man had done it 1,000,000 times before, he jumped into a wicker basket, one of several they kept for bringing in crops from the garden, did what she described as a jig around the rim, then jumped into the basket and disappeared. As she told the story, Vicky said she was not scared of the tiny man, instead described herself as curious and laid there trying to figure out what she had witnessed and if something like this could possibly be real. She never said anything to any of her siblings, not only because it seemed beyond belief, but also, at this time in history, mentioning phenomenons such as this was a sure way to find oneself given away or locked up. It wasn't until she passed in 1996 at her wake when I was sharing my love for Vicky's stories and sharing this one in particular that one of my great uncles, her brother, interjected, I never knew Victoria saw that too. I thought I was just having a vivid dream of a little man dancing on a basket. Amazed at this, I questioned him further, and his story matched my grandmother's. So perhaps this strange thing really did happen. Best wishes, Christina Rose.
Thank you, Christina Rose.
It's so silly.
That is so silly, but the great uncle, that's crazy.
Exactly. I was like, no way, get out of here. This is so silly.
I know.
But then when I got to that, I was like, okay, I'll include it.
And let's say it was a vivid dream for both of them, because that's happened before too.
Yeah, like a co-dreaming.
That's such a wild phenomenon.
Yes.
2 people having the same weirdly specific dream.
Yeah.
Yeah, at the same time
Exactly.
as well. I mean, if that's what happened, that is equally paranormal to me.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I know, it was so silly, but I was like, I actually really love this little tale.
Yeah, me too.
Can you imagine like your grandma telling you a story of a little leprechaun? Like you would probably be like, okay, grandma, but at the right age.
I'm like, okay, she's slipping.
Exactly.
Her mind's going.
But if you were, let's say, 8, 9, you'd probably be like, oh, that's silly. And then that night when you went to bed, sure shit, you can't sleep.
Right?
Right?
Yep.
It's like that kind of thing where it's just a little peculiar.
I just want to share this really quick before I forget. But again, referring to the astonishing legends, we were having such a fun conversation, and I was reminded of this when I talked about like even just 2 vivid dreams, 2 people having the same vivid dream feels like paranormal. We talked about the simple concept of charisma. Some people who are wildly charismatic. We were talking about Rasputin randomly, like the mad monk from Russia in the early 20th century, Grigory Rasputin. But like, what is that? That could be paranormal. Could like this weird charm some people have where it's like they almost hypnotize people around them. And sometimes like
a
very
snake charmer.
Yeah. And sometimes like certain celebrities are said to have had that, or certain politicians.
Sure.
Where it's like, when they're in the room with somebody, it's like you're the only person there that they're talking to.
Sure.
And you quickly and unnaturally feel very attached to them. It's like
And willing to do just about anything for them.
Right. It's like that to me, I'm like, that almost feels like a weirdly paranormal / supernatural ability.
Because does it feel...
What is that? What is charisma?
Does that feel like the person is temporarily possessed by another spirit, by another energy?
No, it just feels like they have some kind of magical power.
Oh, okay. I see what
to
you mean.
me. Yeah,
Okay.
it's like some weird like charm factor that can't be explained naturally. And maybe it can, but I can't explain it naturally.
It's just because you don't have it.
I guess.
I do.
Do you?
I don't. How do you think I got you?
Yeah, you're very charismatic.
Just kidding. Okay, let's go to story number 4.
Okay.
Hello, king and queen of the suck and the spoop. My name is Troy. I am a pest control tech in the greater Memphis area. This show really breaks up the monotony of driving long distances around the city between appointments, so thank you. This story is from my great-grandparents, who are now deceased. However, I was blessed to have them both in my life until my early 20s. This is a brief but weird story of a quirky haunting in their house. My grandfather and I loved to watch ghost hunting shows whenever I would stay the night. I began to notice that every time we would watch one, my grandmother would either leave the room or go to bed early. I asked my grandfather why this was. He told me she didn't like the shows because they had had a poltergeist for a brief period in the early 80s. My jaw hit the floor. My grandparents were devout Catholics, and neither were the type for tall tales. Naturally, I asked for more information. According to Pawpaw, there were 4 occurrences. The first was easy enough to explain away. My grandmother drove an old yellow Volkswagen Beetle at the time that had a standard stick-shift transmission. One day, she looked out the window to see her car in the street. Now, their driveway was on an incline, so she assumed the car had been in neutral and rolled back. However, when she retrieved the car, it was in first gear and the parking brake was set. Weird, sure, but it could have been written off as a mechanical issue. Then the next 2 incidents are harder to explain. My grandmother was retired while my grandfather was still working as a dentist. On Wednesdays, she went to Mass in the morning while he was at work. They had a small fish tank at the time, and upon returning from Mass, she found the fish tank with only an inch or so of water remaining in it. The fish were flopping around, trying to survive. There was no water anywhere to be found. It was as if 10 gallons of water evaporated in the course of an hour. Then, a couple of weeks later, a similar situation occurred. She returned from Mass to find all of her perfume bottles empty. Once again, no liquid anywhere, and this time, no smell of perfume in the air. The last and final straw for them happened just a week later. My grandfather had a solid brass paperweight in his office on his desk that was the shape of an apple. It was a bit smaller than an actual apple, probably about the size of a cue ball, so still a fairly hefty chunk of metal. My grandmother was home alone, vacuuming with her back to the desk. The brass apple flew over her shoulder and into the drywall, missing her head by inches. She immediately called their priest, who came over the same day and blessed the house. He explained that if it was unsuccessful, the next stop would be an exorcism. Luckily for my grandparents, they never had another experience after that. Keep the laughs, the sucks, and the spoops coming, Troy.
Thank you, Troy. Yeah, the last 3 were very intense to me. Especially the fish tank.
The fish tank is what really
all
killed me.
All that water. It's like, yeah, where did that go? And then the perfume bottles empty themselves, and then especially the paperweight flying across the
and that's so scary.
Yeah, into the wall. The first one, I'm like, did somebody take Grandma's car for a joyride?
Totally. And he even says, he's like, okay, you could write that one off. But then in conjunction with the other 3, it's like, and I love that he says at the very beginning, like, they're not the grandparents who are telling.
Totally.
Like my grandfather, oh my God, did he love a story. Sweet
Funny.
Mother of God. Oh, Grandpa Chucky. He loved a tale. My Grandpa Chunky did this thing. I just remembered it right now.
Yeah.
When we were little, he convinced my brother and I that he was magic. Actually, him and my grandma both. They each had a shtick. Grandpa Chucky's shtick was that the windshield wipers, we were little, like we didn't understand how they worked.
Yeah.
And so he would like, do you want to see some magic? And he would yell, Pishki, at the windshield.
And then flip on the wiper.
And we were like, what? But the best yet, I still cannot believe that my brother and I fell for this, was that my grandmother in the back seat of the car, she put an old phone, just like a regular landline phone. Okay.
Yeah.
It was probably mint green, thing.
Sure.
She would pretend that she could call people from the car. This is because this is before cell phones. Okay. This isn't and so she would call people from the car, and we were amazed by this. Absolutely. I think maybe she was talking to Jesus on the phone. I can't remember who.
Yeah.
But
that's funny.
Oh yeah. The two of them, they were funny. But contrary to Troy's family, they were I love, he's saying, my grandparents were not these kinds of people, devout Catholics.
Mm-hmm.
This had to have really messed them up.
Yeah. I'm glad they called a priest, and I'm glad it was resolved quickly.
Yeah. And generally, we don't see poltergeist activity away from, usually it's around young, angsty, emotionally distraught kids.
Yeah.
So I also thought that made this interesting.
Maybe Troy was emotionally distraught and wasn't sharing that part of the story.
No, Troy wasn't even there. It was before he was even alive.
Oh, that's right. It happened before. Oh, yeah. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, so interesting. A poltergeist around two, I don't know, middle-aged people, right? Because she was retired and he was
maybe Troy's parents.
Dun, dun, dun.
Were emotionally all over the place. Who knows? Yeah,
maybe.
One of them.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like anybody else lived there except for the grandparents. So I don't know. Okay, we have one more, and then we'll be out of here.
Alrighty.
Hey guys, I've been a fan of Time Suck and have become addicted to Scared to Death. Yes. I'm 28 episodes in over 5 days, and sleeping at night has gotten quite hard. I would describe myself as a creepy peeper, sometimes brave, and sometimes spooky shit can get the best of me. I have a story about what I think was a shadow person and the ongoing strange occurrences experienced by myself and my wife after encountering this entity. This started 3 or 4 years ago at a country pub in a small English village called Car Colston, Old English for the homestead of Cole on the Bog. A beautiful place in the daytime, but a dark, silent, misty place at night. My wife and I are still, to this day, good friends with the landlord and landlady that run the local pub. Now, we used to order 2 or maybe 3 extra drinks when last orders were called. Then we would stay sitting outside in the back of the pub in the smoking area for hours after the place was locked up. We did this quite regularly. Sometimes we'd see moving lights inside, even though the building was supposedly empty. This would set our group of friends off on ghost storytelling marathons that took us well into the early hours of the next day. The large building was once a textile factory, and the back garden of the pub was a 3-acre field that was sometimes let out for campers and caravan owners when in season. However, this story happens in winter when no one else was staying there. This particular night, we stayed behind after saying goodbye to the staff. Myself, my wife, and 2 other friends continued to enjoy the night. At about 2:30 a.m., one of our friends, the designated driver, drove the 4th friend home and then went home themselves. My wife and I still had full drinks in front of us, so we stayed behind. My wife went to our car to grab her coat as the temperatures had dropped significantly. When she came back, she calmly said, Jack, could you go look in the field and tell me what you see, please? I could see she was worried, so off I went straight away. There stood a man about 40 or 50 yards away with his feet and hands at shoulder width, knees bent slightly, looking ready to run. He was just gray. I couldn't see if he had a hood up or any details such as clothing. I couldn't tell if he was facing forwards, towards us, or away from us. It was simply the shape of a man. I immediately went back to my wife and described what I had seen, and the color in my wife's face drained. She had thought she was seeing things, but I had just described exactly what she had seen. Being a tall and capable man in his mid-20s, I grew angry and worked myself up, ready to confront someone looking to break into my friend's business. I told my wife to stay where she was as I went to face the intruder. But a feeling of dread came over me, and my feet grew heavier with each and every step towards the shadow. Something was not right. If he was facing me, he didn't react at all to a 6'4" angry man walking towards him. And if he had his back to me, then what was he doing, standing in a field by himself at 3 a.m. when it was below freezing? I changed my mind midway to confront him. I had never experienced a feeling like that before. I'm not a fighter, but I'm not scared of any man. I returned to my wife instead, where we watched the only exits of the field while calling our designated driver, asking her if she could come back and get us. We asked her to drive up from the back of the field. Our plan was to use her headlights as a way to better view whatever this thing was. She arrived 10 minutes later. Of course, it felt like it took much longer. And as we heard her car come back into the village, I poked my head around the corner to see if he was still there. He was. And he had gotten closer. I still couldn't make out any details, even though he was closer and a well lit up enough that I should have been able to see more. All I could see was the gray shape of a man. He looked solid, but also wrong. The dread grew so overwhelming, my eyes filled with tears. Headlights came up from behind me and shone across the field as planned. Nothing. Whatever that thing was, it had disappeared. There was nowhere to hide and no way to exit the field without running right past us. We went back in the light of the next day to check the field where he had stood. No footprints, no signs of activity at all apart from our friend's tire tracks. What had he been doing? Was it trying to scare us just for a reaction? Was it waiting to attack us? Did it attack us, unbeknownst to us? I asked that final question because strange things happened afterwards. I have had 2 experiences of sleep paralysis since the encounter at the pub, where a strange creature seemingly paralyzed below the waist crawls up my body using deformed arms, then sits limp on my chest and stares at me. There is nothing I can do when this happens except wait for it to end. My only comfort is now knowing about sleep paralysis and telling myself it's all in my head. I now also sometimes wake up with a feeling that something is not quite right. I will turn to my wife to find her sat upright, staring at me. I usually comfort her and just tell her to go back to sleep. One time she really spooked me with her odd behavior. She was staring at me, more accurately through me, with seemingly dead eyes. She was not herself. I said, half joking to her, "You're going to kill me in my sleep one of these days, aren't you?" She let out a childish giggle and then put her head down on the pillow and with a deep sigh went right back to sleep. To this day, she sleepwalks in a manner of trying to be sneaky, head down, stepping softly. When she's not sneaking about the house, she talks in her sleep, never making sense, but sometimes saying words that get my attention like knife or ouch. It was only after these experiences that I heard your Shadow People and Sleep Paralysis Time Suck episodes, which both sent chills down my spine. Now listening to Scared to Death, I feel I can relate to a lot of the stories you tell on the show. Yours, Jack.
God, I was just thinking as Jack shared the end of that story about his wife waking up in the middle of the night.
Oh my God.
And just staring at him. And then I'm saying some things too, or at least responding to what he's saying. But I was just thinking, if you woke up and I was sitting in bed
my God,
staring at you.
Forget it.
Oh my, you would scream bloody murder.
Beyond. I think I might pass out.
Yeah.
I've never passed out in my life, but I think I might.
And then I would wake up to like just a horror show of like if I was asleep in some kind of like trance-like state, and then I wake up to you just like reacting as if a murderer was currently in our home. That would just be so bad for both of us.
If I
would freak out, by the way, if I woke up and you were sitting in bed staring at me.
How about her creepy ass sleepwalking?
And
sleepwalking that is
like knife,
walking around, mumbling shit, and like walking around like delicately tiptoeing, sneaking around corners.
So creepy.
That is so creepy.
I would lose my mind if I woke up and you were doing that.
I would say, imagine this, Sicily.
Oh my God.
19, whatever.
Golden Girls, yeah.
Yeah. But no, just think about it. You get up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom almost all nights. Yeah. So just imagine you're coming back from using the bathroom. And I'm hidden around a corner.
Oh my God.
Can you even? But I'm unaware of what I'm doing. So now you scream. It probably snaps me out of my sleepwalking. And now I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Why am I here?
Yeah.
The whole thing would be so disorienting and so upsetting.
I have some true nightmare fuel for you. What if you got up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night?
Yeah.
And then you come back out of the bathroom and you hear what sounds like heavy, like a weird like breathing or something from down in the basement.
Oh.
And you look down there and I'm just standing in the darkness staring up at you.
Do you remember that time you scared me and I screamed so loud and then I
did like
cried?
You did like a little stutter step, like a cartoon character.
That's what would
backwards.
happen.
Mm-hmm. You screamed and then went into tears and then laughed.
Oh, adrenaline. Yeah.
Yikes.
If I was a good prankster and if I could handle you being upset with me, because like mostly the reason I don't want to prank you is because I am a delicate person and
you don't want retaliation?
Yes, but also like, okay, when I have to like kill a bug, like I feel weak in the knees.
Oh,
like
yeah,
I'm just not built like that. So if I even have to tell you like something upsetting, like an email we got from a fan, I'm already like a little like hot under the collar, just anxious.
Yeah.
So what I can't handle with a really great prank is afterwards, watching you be truly scared.
Yeah.
And then afterwards you being like, I really didn't like that you did that. Like I would just feel like disappointed dad vibes.
Yeah.
I couldn't handle it.
Yeah,
So we can talk about great pranks, but I'm never going to do it because I can't handle you being sad with me.
And I'm not going to do them to you probably just because like it would upset you so greatly that it would pass the point of like being funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think about like Kyler was fun to prank because of his reactions. Currently, I wouldn't prank you. And then Monroe, it's funny. Monroe, I would love to see her. Like, it would entertain me to like really scare the shit out of her. But with her, I truly fear retaliation.
I think she'd be so mad at you.
She'd be so mad. And then like what she would do, I'm genuinely afraid of how far she would take things on the comeback. It's kind of like why like I'll still kind of like, oh, we went like skiing this last week and I'll take my gloves off and like bop her on the head. But like I'm always sussing it out. Like, like how far can I take this? Because I know that she'll grab a glove and just hit me in the face as hard as she can. Like her retaliations are severe.
Well, yeah, I think she's at that point in her life where she doesn't actually know how strong she is.
Yeah, she's strong.
She's fucking ripped. Like that girl is like, I feel like she's like
she can hurt you now.
Yeah, and I feel like she's like 1% body fat. Like she's just, she's grown into her adult body.
Yeah.
She's like thin in that like built way.
Yeah,
and she's fucking, and she's full of Cummins anger.
I know. Her and I talked about that.
She's got it.
The other day, I was just talking about like default emotions. I actually referenced you where I'm like, Lindsay's like, she's sensitive. I'm like, she recognizes that she can cry easily.
Yeah.
I go, unfortunately, I've gotten more sensitive as I've gotten older, but my default emotion just for life in general is rage.
Yeah.
Like when I don't know what else to do when something's, it's like it immediately just converted to just a lot of anger.
Yeah.
And it'll like dissipate. And I'm like, you are the same. And she was like, oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
She's very aware.
Yeah.
Of just having like a inexplicable inner rage that she doesn't understand. And I'm like, I go, your grandpa has it, my dad, Kyler has some of it.
I think your sister has some of it too.
Oh, my sister has a lot of it. Every single one of my uncles on that side has it. My dad's dad, my paternal grandpa, I guess he had it like crazy when he was young.
Huh?
Oh yeah, like
but on your mom's side,
no one,
like just passive.
Yeah, it's so interesting because then I was thinking, I'm like, I literally don't have a single memory of hearing my grandpa Ward ever yell, ever. Not a single, not one memory of my grandma Betty yell, and they were basically like parents to me. I spent so much time with them.
Yeah,
not one memory of them getting very upset.
What would your mom say though? Would she say, because in the grandparent role, I think you have more patience.
She did say that Grandpa Ward would get pretty upset when he was younger with them.
Okay, so maybe
she saw some of that. Never with Grandma Betty. And then, my great-grandparents on that side were pretty old when I saw them, but, they get cranky, but they would never, get, enraged.
Sure, but again, like the relationship, like parent to child versus grandparent.
Been, when they were younger.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. Monroe, I don't even know that she would retaliate so much as I think that she would just be actually, truly mad at you.
Which is also not fun.
No, I think she'd be emotionally angry at you for weeks.
Yeah, for taking things too far,
So, but she would love to prank somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
funny.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's always that thing, We all like to dish it out, but...
yeah, a few of us can take it.
Well, I can't, so...
You want to thank some Annabelles?
I do. Big thanks to our Annabelles who keep the lights on. Courtney P., Rachel Smith, Aaron O'Donnell, Greg Carino, John Patton, Brian Holtz, Morgan Rand, Sarah Dumaine, Carly Rose, and Logan James.
Thank you. And I would like to thank the following Annabelles as well. Jade Snyder, Mariah Gober, Ian Dalton, Tiffany B., Mike Oxlong, Heart. Just Heart, like the band.
You missed it. Mike Oxlong. We missed it last time. Now, I think that this patron
Yeah.
has subscribed and then unsubscribed and subscribed again. Mike Oxlong.
Oh my gosh. I didn't pronunciate it right.
Yep. You put the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable.
Mike Oxlong. Okay. Yep. All right. Well done. Very sneaky.
Or it's a new patron who like heard us do it before and completely screwed it up. And then someone was like, surely this won't happen again.
Yep. Okay. Fair.
Well done.
And then Esme Ponce.
Esme?
I've never seen that. ESME. Esme. Isaac Richards and Camden Wilson.
Nice.
Nice.
Okay. And then I have a handful of spoopy shout outs.
Okay.
To Brandy from Rianne and Courtney. Happy birthday to the best aunt and mom and Mimi ever. We love and appreciate all you do for us. To Sammy, aka Spam, from your dad, Jess. Happy 15th birthday. I love you and wish you the best day ever. To Alexa from Alexa. You are stronger than you think. If this last year didn't kick your ass, then you can do anything. And lastly, to Ken from Virginia, your professional yapper wife. Virginia, let's go to lunch. Happy 30th birthday and congrats on being so close to graduating. I know that working, going to school, and raising a family has been tough, but I'm incredibly amazed at your dedication and perseverance. You've earned this degree, and I'm so proud to be your partner in crime. Love you to the moon and back.
Aw.
I know. Listen, she might be a professional yapper, Ken, but like, she had a lot of kind things to say, so at least it's good yapping.
That's true.
I get it, Virginia. I'm the same way.
And that is our show. Thank you for continuing to send in your personal tales of terror to mystory@scaredtodeathpodcast.com. You can email us for everything else, info@scaredtodeathpodcast.com. Thank you, Logan Keith, for scoring today's show. Thanks to Heather Rylander organizing the My Story emails. Thanks to book editor Drew Atana, polishing and preparing listener stories for book number 6. Thank you to Molly Box for finding the first story I shared this week, and to Olivia Lee for finding the second. We are still on Facebook and Instagram, where we post the pics that accompany episodes and more. Some weird pics today at Scared to Death Podcast. We also have a private Facebook group, Creeps and Peepers, full of fellow horror lovers you should meet if you haven't already. And big thanks to the Y'all Seen Eyes, the Creeps and Peepers moderators, for keeping that online community such a fun and welcoming place.
Yes.
Enjoy your nightmares, Creeps and Peepers. Hope you were scared to death.
Bye.
If spirits threaten me in this place, fight water by water and fire by fire. Banish their souls into nothingness and remove their powers until the last trace. Let these evil beings flee through time and space. Evil may pass through, but has no home here within, scared to death.
Mad Magic Productions.